Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. Welcome to CBSN's coverage of the first Democratic debate for president. We have been watching live coverage of the first Democratic debate of the 2020 presidential election. The night promised a fiery discussion between the 10 candidates on stage, and it delivered. The debate touched on on issues of immigration, healthcare, climate change, gun control, and foreign policy. The sparring highlighted the differences between the more moderate and liberal points of view within the Democratic Party. Let's bring in CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns. She is in the spin room in Miami. And with me here on set are Leslie Sanchez, Hari Sevugan, Molly Hooper, and Antjuan Seawright. Leslie is a CBS News contributor and Republican strategist. Hari is a Democratic strategist and partner at 270 Strategies. Molly is a CBSN political contributor. And Antjuan is a CBSN political contributor and Democratic strategist. But Caitlin, I want to start with you in Miami and specifically the topic of impeachment. So Congressman Beto O'Rourke, former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, was asked by the moderator, if the House chooses not to impeach, as president, would you do anything to address the potential crimes outlined in the Mueller report? And I just want to read his answer because I'm told we don't quite have it ready yet. But he said, we cannot allow that. It is ready now. OK, we do have that thought. Let's listen to O'Rourke's answer on that.
And we cannot allow that to stand. So we must begin impeachment now so that we have the facts and the truth, and we follow them as far as they go and as high up as they reach, and we save this democracy. And if we've not been able to do that in this year or the year that follows, and under my administration, our Department of Justice will pursue these facts and ensure that there are consequences, there is accountability, and there is justice. It's the only way that we save this country.
So, Caitlin, explain for us the significance of those comments coming from O'Rourke.
Right. Well, the Democrats were having a debate about whether to move forward with impeachment. This is after, of course, Robert Mueller came out in that press conference about a month ago detailing his report. And it also comes against news that we heard yesterday that Mueller is expected to testify in front of the House Judiciary Committee later next month. Democrats have been trying to figure out how to approach this issue, whether to move forward with impeachment itself, whether to open up proceedings, or whether to just let the issue breathe. And there are mixed reviews from Democrats on this. You heard Beto O'Rourke's answer there. I talked to John Delaney earlier today, and he said that he trusts Nancy Pelosi to figure this out, and he would look to her for her leadership. I'm here in the spin room where the debate has just ended, and cameras and surrogates are all around me, and I bet we'll hear a little bit more about that as this night continues here in Miami.
All right, well, I want to listen to another moment that is getting a lot of attention. Here's Senator Elizabeth Warren discussing health care and a fellow 2020 candidate.
Medicare for all solves that problem. And I understand there are a lot of politicians who say, oh, it's just not possible, we just can't do it, have a lot of political reasons for this. What they're really telling you is they just won't fight for it. Well, health care is a basic human right, and I will fight for basic human rights.
All right, so let's turn to the panel here. I mean, we have been talking about all evening how critically important this issue of health care is, Hari, for Democrats. It continues to be, when you ask voters in polls, what is the top priority for you on the Democratic side? It is health care. This is where she explicitly said, I'm with Bernie when it comes to Medicare for all. We didn't necessarily have sort of that clarity in the way that we heard it from Elizabeth Warren tonight.
That's true. I think that was one of her best moments in the debate. She got across that she's going to fight. That's what she really wanted to get across, that she's the fighter in this race. She's going to take a fight for all of these issues that we care about, but also against Donald Trump. I will also say that healthcare isn't just what moves the Democratic base. It is what moves independent voters. That we saw that in 2018. And so this is an issue that is going to play not just well in a primary, but in a general. I do think that we saw tonight the difference in the party between Medicare for all and a public option. And we'll hear more and more about that. One of the things I was looking for tonight was, are the candidates going to be speaking to Twitter, or are they going to be speaking to voters? And we saw a little bit about that in this answer as well, and the impeachment answer.
Well, you're nodding your head, Antjuan.
Because I've been saying all night is the difference between the Beltway conversation and the coastal elites. And what I think, and no disrespect to the senator from Massachusetts, but I think the American people, or particularly the Democratic Party base, and believe it or not, the base is not the liberals on Twitter, are very clear about they want to strengthen the ACA and build upon that. And while Medicare for All is certainly a conversation, and it has favorability and flavorability with a certain segment of the Democratic Party, I don't think it's for everyone. And if you look at the mood of the Congress, I think it's very reflective of let's fix the ACA.
Let's listen to, if we can pull up SOT 6 here. This was also on the issue of health care. Some back and forth on the question of the role of private insurers. Let's listen to that.
To get everybody careful.
Private insurance is not working for tens of millions of Americans. When you talk about the co-pays, the deductibles, the premiums, the out-of-pocket expenses, it's not working.
That's
How
right.
can you defend
for
a
those
system
for
that's
whom it is not working, they can choose Medicare. For the culinary workers in Nevada who I listened to, who negotiated for those plans,
for people.
They're able to keep them.
Why are you defending private insurance?
Say they like their private health insurance, by the way. It should be noted that 100 million Americans, I mean, I think we should be the party that keeps what's working and fixes what's broken. I mean, doesn't that make sense? I mean, we should give everyone in this country health care as a basic human right for free, full stop. But we should also give them the option to buy private insurance. Why do we have to stand for taking away something from people?
So, Molly, if we're looking for ways to distinguish among the candidates here, that was a prime example.
Absolutely. And Amy Klobuchar even built on that and went one step further and went to this idea of it's not just making sure everybody's insured. We have to lower the cost of health care. And that's actually more of a conservative, traditionally conservative position. If you look at who's talking about that, really actively pursuing that on Capitol Hill, it's Republicans. How do we get health care costs down, full stop? You know, insurance, it's very expensive, but if you don't have it, you shouldn't be getting gouged. And for Amy Klobuchar to step up and take that position and say, I'll go after pharma, the president hasn't. And one thing that Amy Klobuchar did repeatedly was actually attack President Trump. She's the one candidate who mentioned his name probably more than any of the others on that stage. And that was sort of an indication that that he's the problem and that she can work across party lines, which she has done. And more to the point of getting to those independent voters, you know, those never Trump Republicans in a general election, somebody like an Amy Klobuchar seemed to be sort of playing to that voice today, or that vote tonight.
Caitlin, I want to go to you in Miami. Based on what you were seeing and hearing and, you know, sometimes feeling, right, because there's an energy to these things, and you were there at your post in the spin room, what stood out to you with this very crowded field tonight as you were watching some of these really sort of substantive discussions and debate points really unfold?
Really substantive discussions, and some discussions kind of in the weeds, but important ones. All of the candidates were asked how they would get things through that they're proposing. We're talking about healthcare right now. We're talking about Medicare for all. They were asked, you know, how do you get that through if you have a Republican, Mitch McConnell, in charge of the Senate? And they couldn't really answer that. And so they're talking about lots of these big ideas, but they weren't really clear on how they would get that through a divided Congress. I can say that the most interesting and contentious part of the night was when Julian Castro, the former HUD secretary, and Beto O'Rourke, the former congressman from El Paso, Texas, really got into it over the issue of immigration. At issue in particular is Julian Castro's support for repealing part of the immigration law that makes it a federal crime to cross the border illegally. He wants to repeal that.
And Caitlin, we have that bite, so let's go ahead and play that, and then we'll continue the conversation on the other side. Here's that exchange Caitlin described.
The reason that they're separating these little children from their families is that they're using Section 1325 of that act, which criminalizes coming across the border, to incarcerate the parents and then separate them. Some of us on this stage have called to end that section, to terminate it. Some, like Congressman O'Rourke, have not. And I want to challenge all of the candidates to do that. I just think it's a mistake, Bethel. I think it's a mistake. And I think that if you truly want to change the system, then we got to repeal that section. If not, then it might as well be the same policy.
Let me respond to this very briefly. Actually, as a member of Congress, I helped to introduce legislation that would ensure that we don't criminalize those who are seeking asylum and refuge in this country. If you're fleeing desperation, then I want to make sure that you're treated with respect.
I'm still talking about everybody else.
But you're looking at just one small part of this. I'm talking about a comprehensive rewrite of our immigration laws.
That's not true.
And if we
So, Caitlin, explain for us the significance of that, because people who may not be familiar, it might sound very much in the weeds, but again, we've been talking about sort of the sense of values and philosophies here at issue, and this seemed to be a very big difference.
Absolutely. And these are two Texans who have proposed comprehensive immigration policies into this Democratic primary at a time that lots of Democrats haven't really focused on immigration. What's significant about this moment beyond the policy is that Julian Castro had really been looking for a breakout moment. Remember, he was considered a fast rising star in the party before this primary got underway. He gave the keynote address at the 2012 Democratic National Convention. But in this race, he has been pretty low down in the polls, hasn't really been able to gain traction. So his campaign really saw tonight as a way for him to break through. And I can say that after that exchange, his campaign manager and others from his team were walking around in the spin room talking to reporters already. They knew that that was kind of the moment that they needed, because it not only, in their view, allowed Castro to flex his policy muscle, but also allowed him to have a moment. And remember, this is such a crowded stage. It's a very crowded field. Every minute counts. All of these candidates, you heard them trying to break through and make some.
Oh, Caitlin, are you with us? All right. Okay. I'm sorry. I think she had to go. But that was so fascinating to watch that exchange play out. And Leslie, it occurs to me that for you as a Republican strategist here, what is it that jumped out in terms of moments? Because if I look at Twitter right now, there are a lot of Republicans weighing in, and sort of they've taken very copious notes on various positions that they've heard some of these Democrats take. What is it that, from your perspective as a Republican strategist, you think might end up in a campaign commercial here down the road, might be sort of a tailor-made ad for President Trump down the road?
Anything that was related to removing private health care coverage, that's the repeat. I mean, repeat, rinse, repeat, and put it all over again, because that is really a pain point for many people. It's the fear point that you will ask across the aisle. It scores in terms of intensity extremely high. People think you're going to take them away because of the jeopardy it puts people in, financial jeopardy. And there were things that Republicans and Democrats agree on: pre-existing conditions, extending the age to 26 so that young students could continue to stay on their family plan. There are a lot of really big positives. But even when Republicans tried to reform, remember, or even the case the hardliners wanted to replace it, there was not an appetite for that, because though it is an entitlement program, it is one that is giving a lot of safety and security to people. So this idea of mending it and making it work together, Republicans learned that the hard way. We wanted to win that debate. We should have won it when ACA was being passed. And the other thing I would say, just on a separate part, Julian Castro, two different things. One, he's really one of the breakout stars in terms of prowess of the issues, understanding immigration. I don't agree with the executive order effort because, again, I think that promotes false hope. But I fear that he is the Newt Gingrich of the debate stage, in the sense that Newt was somebody who was very good, very much understood policy, but he never had a base. And I look at a candidate like him and I go, where does he go? Like, who is his base in terms of, he's not a governor. He doesn't have that base support. And if you're thinking Latino vote is going to be what carries you over, it's not necessarily that. So some of these candidates are great candidates without a home.
What about that, Hari? Because it's an interesting point. When you think about his depth of experience and knowledge and his ability to be conversant on that topic, it is fascinating to see a moment like that, the one that we just saw play out.
For sure. Just very quickly to talk about the healthcare answer, there was a moment where the moderators asked, would anybody on the stage want to get rid of private health insurance?
Right.
And Elizabeth Warren was up there by herself, raising her hand. That is a shot that's going to be in an ad.
Didn't de Blasio? I think de Blasio did. The two of them.
But he was so far early, too.
Correct. Yeah.
Harry, dismissive wave of the hand there.
I
Okay.
know. I've already been up Bill Boswell, but he had a good night. He had a relatively good night. But that shot, I think,
that shot is going to be a campaign
clear.
commercial?
Yeah, someone's already clipped it, and they're going to use it if she's the nominee. Back to your question, I think Castro had an incredible night. He had this moment with Beto. Beto ended up on the wrong side of a lot of attacks tonight, which I think was
Is that
he was
surprising?
on defense. A little bit. One of the things that coming in tonight that I was looking for is there are a bunch of folks that should be doing better than they are, that have a lane, that have a good story. Castro is one of them. Beto is one of them. Klobuchar and Booker. Of all of those folks, Castro definitely had the best night. He had these moments. He came across as someone really well informed, incredibly passionate. Knew his conviction, and he spoke with clarity. And I think that's what the Democratic primary is.
He was very clear in his policy position, and he behaved like an executive tonight. And I think by far he won the night when you compare the candidates pound for pound. But I want to look at the debate stage tonight. It was a historical night because it's the first time ever we had more than one woman candidate on the debate stage, and we had a Hispanic. That speaks to where we are as a country, but most importantly, it speaks to where we are as a Democratic Party and why we brand ourselves as the big tent party. And I'm just so proud to sit here as a Democrat tonight. However, the one thing that I am so cautious about, and what I warn every candidate tonight and tomorrow night, is that, look, Jay-Z made it clear, nobody wins when the family feuds. And while we understand there's some policy differences between all of them, at the end of the day, we can't cut and bruise each other up to the point where we limp across the finish line to have a nominee, and we're not united when we have a nominee.
But wasn't Julian Castro the only one who actually took on another candidate on the stage? He's the only one that called somebody else out and said, Beto, I disagree with you here. I think he's...
De Blasio again went after Beto.
Well,
right.
But he was on the end. So, no, but to that point, I think Republicans learned that when we had such a large dais and you had so many individuals, if they did not take shots at each other, and we said the same argument probably at this table, that they're going to be so damaged getting to convention, that how are they going to bring all the elements of the factions together behind certainly like Donald Trump, who had all of that additional baggage, but it does work. Because
and he took on everyone on that stage.
But the difference is, Leslie, you all fall in line, we fall in love. And what I saw, because I worked for her in 2016, is that we did not have a united front on the Democratic Party, and as a result, you can partly say Donald Trump is the president because not everyone who voted in the Democratic primary was lockstep behind our nominee Hillary Clinton.
I want to make sure we go back to Miami because I'm told we have our Caitlin Huey-Burns back with us. So, Caitlin, what is the, just give us a sense of sort of the atmospherics, for folks who don't know. Caitlin is there in the spin room where you can see now all of the candidates and their surrogates are descended upon the hordes of reporters who have gathered there.
That's right. We're right here in the spin room, and some of the candidates have just walked out, leaving the debate hall into another room. I just saw out of the corner of my eye Amy Klobuchar, I believe. So they are done with this debate for tonight, and either they or their surrogates will come out and try to spin the press, talk about how they felt their night was, talk about things they think their candidate did well, and talk about some things that they want to focus on moving forward. When we're kind of going back to that exchange, talking about Julian Castro, a couple minutes after that sparring really with Beto O'Rourke, his campaign manager was out here talking to reporters. So they clearly believe they had a good night, and I think we'll be hearing a lot from Castro throughout the night. The challenge, though, is that this is just night one. These candidates, even if they had these breakout moments, they have to stay relevant in tomorrow's news cycle. And so right now is the time to capitalize on a good debate performance. So watch out for videos that are soliciting funds for their campaign. Watch for these candidates to use creative ways to really keep the attention on themselves if they believe they did well. Keep that momentum going, because tomorrow night the clock resets. The stage will be filled with new people. Those people being kind of the top tier contenders, as we've seen in the polls. Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris will also be be up there, as will Mayor Pete Buttigieg. So tonight is a night for some candidates to celebrate, others to reassess their campaigns, perhaps looking again for that breakout moment, but also trying to stay relevant by this time tomorrow.
Right, and it was an opportunity for those candidates appearing tomorrow to watch how this all unfolded, and they have the benefit now of having seen that format. I mean, Hari, that's not a small thing, especially when the stakes are this high.
Yeah, we certainly they have the benefit of seeing how the dynamics work, and I think that the dynamics of the candidates on stage tomorrow is different. Tonight, a lot of folks had to reintroduce themselves. Beto, Castro, and they did a decent job of that. Castro especially. Tomorrow, people kind of know who these folks are.
Right.
We've got Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders. They're going to take up a lot of oxygen, and they're very, very different. And they're on opposite ends of the spectrum in a lot of ways of the party. And so I expect that tension will be a little bit different tomorrow night than it was tonight.
No, it does remind me, on the Republican side, we had the very similar thing. It allowed the people with the larger brand name to focus on the general. Remember, there were situations when they were already aiming at the opposition as opposed to taking each other on, and it just seemed, they had elevated above and beyond the debate. So that's another thing. But I'm going to go back to Castro, who I adore personally. I think he's extraordinary talent. He and his family and Mama. But again, you're going to
the Texan on our
and the
panel.
Texan here. We're familia, so I say that. But it's also difficult. Somebody who doesn't get, who may not even win their own state.
Tonight was clear, and I think tomorrow will be even more clear. They're not running against each other. They're running for the nomination. And I think tomorrow night you will see that point made clearly, because there are going to be people who are going to want to differentiate themselves, even catch up with the front runner, Joe Biden. But I think they will make a mistake by attacking him, because they're not running against Joe Biden. They're running for our party's nomination.
All right.
And I think that point was made clear tonight.
Hold that thought, Antjuan, because our Caitlin Huey-Burns is standing by with John Delaney there in the spin room. Caitlin, take it away.
Yes, we're here with former Congressman John Delaney. Thank you for being here with us.
Great to be here.
You had a few moments, even when you weren't asked questions, you really got into that debate. Can you explain, first of all, what your strategy was trying to get those moments that weren't handed to you, questions that weren't handed to you, and also how do you think you did on that debate stage?
I thought it went very well. I mean, I believe that we should be talking about what's really happening in this country and telling the truth. And the Medicare for All discussion was occurring, or the healthcare discussion, was no one was actually pointing out the significant policy and political problems with Medicare for All. So yeah, I had to force my way in. But I think the point I was making is a point the American people need to hear, which is a bunch of candidates, Senator Sanders, Senator Warren, they're running on making private insurance illegal. Right now, about 50% of our seniors have something called Medicare Advantage. That's private insurance. Under Medicare for All, that would be illegal. Do we actually think we're going to win any elections by telling our seniors, just as one example, that their Medicare Advantage, which they've selected, is going to be illegal? Why do we got to be the party of kicking people off their health insurance? Why can't we be the party of giving everyone health care who doesn't have it?
That was a real moment and an actual debate that we had on a debate stage, which a lot of us weren't really expecting to have much of a debate. It felt more like a lightning round in the beginning. Do you feel like you were able to make your case on Medicare for All?
Well, I would have loved to make more points, but I think I got the main arguments out there, including that, by the way, the Medicare for All bill keeps Medicare reimbursement rates the same, and that would cause pretty much every hospital in this country to close. Because if you go to anyone, as I said on the debate stage, who's running a hospital, and you ask them how it would go if all their reimbursement rates were at the Medicare rate, they would all close. So these are just some obvious things that have to be part of this debate.
Can you take us into that debate hall, onto that stage? Because we're here in the spin room. We are watching that debate on TV like most Americans are watching, but you were actually on that stage.
Yes.
What was the atmosphere like? And what is it like to stand on stage with 9 other contenders?
It's fun. Listen, my wife and some of my daughters were there, which is an amazing thrill and privilege. It's great to be out there with all the people, all the voters, all the people I'm running against. They're terrific people. But we just need to make sure we have real debates.
And you were the first candidate to announce your campaign.
Yes.
You've been traveling all over the country, specifically in Iowa. I believe you've been to all of the counties.
Yes.
Where do you go from here? You've been lower down in the polls. People have been wondering if this debate will help make or break your campaign. How do you assess it moving forward?
I think the debate went well. Again, I think I told the truth, and that's what my campaign's about.
And what's next for you?
I'm going to Iowa this weekend.
So.
And what message do you hope to tell Iowans?
Same message. You know, I'm the person who's going to solve these problems. I'm going to build infrastructure. I'm going to improve your job and pay. I'm going to fix healthcare. I have real plans, real solutions, not impossible promises.
Congressman, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you. Elaine, back to you.
All right, Caitlin, really fascinating to hear the congressman's remarks there. As you know, people do wonder what is going to actually take place now, what opinions may or may not shift. I can tell you, Caitlin, as you were speaking, I was looking at, no surprise, the RNC statement picking up on that point about insurance. Yeah. So this is just part of their statement. Quote, tonight we saw the Democrat Party advocate for open borders and proudly raise their hands to eliminate our choice of health care for our families. To Hari's point, that moment where Lester Holt asked who would want to do away with private insurance. So, you know, Caitlin, it's very interesting to see the congressman go out there and take that fight in a very public way like that at a very early point in the debate to make it clear he intends to separate himself as much as he can from the rest of the candidates.
Absolutely, and we actually talked to him earlier on in the day, and he made a point to say that that was what he wanted to focus on in this debate. The party is having a really open discussion. Tonight you saw that really at center stage, quite literally, this open discussion about how to address health care. Democrats feel like they had a winning issue in 2018 by campaigning on health care issues. They believe that helped fuel their campaigns and help them win back the majority. The question is what happens next. So I will say that, you know, Medicare for All is really popular when you look at the top line numbers, but when you kind of drill down to the details, you'll find in polling that people do get concerned about what this would mean for their current insurance program, what it would do to their current Medicare if they're on it. They get a little bit anxious about changes, and so that's what the debate was about tonight.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, Leslie Sanchez, Hari Sevugan, Molly Hooper, and Antjuan Seawright, please stay with us. We're going to check back in with you in just a little bit. But while we've been watching the candidates vie for their party's nomination, how do voters feel? For that, let's go to Nicole Skanga. She is a CBS News campaign reporter. She joins me now from what was a watch party in West Ossipee, New Hampshire. So, Nicole, now that the debate is over, did any concrete proposals put forward by the candidates tonight stick out to voters in New Hampshire?
Well, Elaine, I spoke with a 9th grade social studies teacher, Kathleen, following the debate, who told me she was really moved by Senator Cory Booker's bold moves on stage. She also appreciated that he brought up the issue of gun violence, citing a shooting that happened just last week in his home city of Newark, New Jersey. Kathleen said that she was put just absolutely in shock a few weeks ago when her school had to go on lockdown due to what they thought was an active shooter in the building for 2 hours. And that issue really resonated with her. Other folks here on their way out told me that the standout surprise candidate was Secretary Julian Castro, who they felt, again, was very strong on immigration and appreciated him reaching out to audiences speaking in both English and Spanish.
Well, how have the voters in New Hampshire been sort of weeding through this crowded field of candidates so far?
Well, the message here is very simple, Elaine. Even for the most seasoned of primary voters, there are too many candidates. It's a lot to sort through, and this was only round one of a 2-round set of debates here. And so even in the Granite State, where folks are used to having candidates roll in, they're overwhelmed. That said, they were very heartened to see what was a diverse field of candidates on stage, with both young and old, folks of all sorts of different backgrounds, women and men on that stage tonight, Elaine.
All right, Nicole Skanga from New Hampshire for us. Nicole, thank you.
Thank you so much. And Elaine, I just have to give a quick shout out to Hobbs Tavern here in West Ossipee, New Hampshire, for having me and for keeping the lights on. There's some sort of tornado thunderstorm warning outside, and they are still here with me here.
Okay, thank you, Hobbs Tavern. Everybody, please stay safe. Thank you so much, Nicole.
Thank you.
Coming up after the break, healthcare, immigration, and climate change were topics of conversation at the first night of the debate. Ahead, how voters, well, we just heard how voters in New Hampshire are reacting, but we'll have more of that coming up next. You're streaming CBSN. Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the first Democratic debate. Standing by now in the spin room in Miami with our Caitlin Huey-Burns is Representative Tulsi Gabbard. Caitlin, go ahead.
Hi, thanks, Elaine. I'm here with Congresswoman Gabbard, who just is fresh off the debate stage.
Yes.
How do you think you did tonight?
I think it went well. It was great to have this platform to be able to speak to the American people about the many different issues that we face, and specifically to raise the point that our foreign policy cannot be separated from every domestic issue that we talked about tonight.
Do you think that Democrats are talking enough about foreign policy in this race? It's so far pretty much been dominated by healthcare and the economy.
No, the answer is no. And, for me, I've served as a soldier for over 16 years, deployed twice to the Middle East, served in Congress for over 6 years on the Foreign Affairs, Armed Services, and Homeland Security Committee. So I understand the importance of our national security, as well as the high cost of war, the cost that has taken a toll on so many American lives, but the cost that's been paid for by every single American in this country, the trillions of dollars that we've spent since 9/11 alone. Dollars that need to be used to pay for health care for all, to make sure we're investing in a green economy, that we're making sure we've got clean water to drink for every person in this country, clean air to breathe. The needs are great. This is the kind of change that I seek to bring as President Commander-in-Chief, to bring the sea change in our foreign policy that invests in serving the needs of our people.
Iran has also been a topic of conversation not only tonight, but of course over the past several days. What would a President Tulsi Gabbard do differently than what President Trump is doing now? And do you give him credit for not authorizing eventually that Iran strike?
I would do everything different as it relates to Iran based on what this Trump administration has done. He didn't launch an attack, but President Trump has taken every single step that has brought us to the brink of war with Iran. So no, I don't give him credit for that, because he is responsible for the precarious position that we're in now, beginning with removing the United States from the Iran nuclear deal, even though Iran was in compliance, escalating crippling sanctions against Iran, designating their military as a terrorist organization, something unprecedented to any other country in the world, and continuing to deploy more U.S. troops to the region. He's pushing us closer and closer to the brink of this war that would be so costly it would make the Iraq war look like a picnic.
For you and your campaign, what does tonight mean for you? Was it a make or break moment, and how do you move forward from this?
It's a great opportunity to be able to speak to the American people. I'm going to continue to bring this message of peace and prosperity, of ending our regime change wars, the new Cold War and nuclear arms race, so that we can invest in the things that people need in their everyday lives. This is a message I look forward to continuing to bring to communities across the country, and hope folks saw what we're doing here tonight.
Congresswoman, thank you so much for being with us. Elaine, back to you.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you. Let's bring in our panel again to discuss this. Back with me here on set are Leslie Sanchez, Hari Sevugan, Molly Hooper, and Antjuan Seawright. All right, Hari, I want to start with you, because it's interesting when you look at the biography of a Tulsi Gabbard. It's not typically the biography that we've seen in the past, where national security, military service credentials, these are the things that she has highlighted, right, with respect to her own background. We don't see it often in a woman. We don't certainly see it on the Democratic side very often, but that seems to be changing, of course, this year.
Yeah, we've got several veterans that are in the presidential field. We saw a number of veterans get elected in 2018 into Congress. It's been a very successful formula for Democrats. I think with Congresswoman Gabbard, she's had other issues that have cropped up. Her position on LGBT rights, her position on Assad, have been far out of the mainstream, and definitely out of the mainstream of the Democratic Party, but far out of the mainstream of the country. And I think that has held her back. Seth Moulton, Pete Buttigieg, there are other folks who can speak with the same kind of experience, with that same perspective, understanding the seriousness of war.
But foreign policy issues, Antjuan, as we were talking about before, they don't necessarily rank very high with these Democratic primary voters. It's not something that is consistently asked about on the campaign trail, for instance.
I think part of the reason we find that is because you have to remember who's occupying that temporary public housing unit called the White House. And he came into the race with zero foreign policy experience. The country gave the president a pass then. They're giving him a pass now. Some of his behavior on issues of foreign policy. So you have that. And I think when you look at who the front runner is to this point, Joe Biden, most people agree that he checks the foreign policy box, whether it comes to his experience in the Senate or his time as VP and the level of respect he has commanded and he gets from foreign leaders all across the country. When you look at people making the conversation about why Joe Biden is the front runner, it's because partly of his foreign affairs experience.
All right, stand by because we want to go to our Ed O'Keefe, CBS News political correspondent, who is standing by with Senator Amy Klobuchar. Ed.
Elaine, thank you. Senator Klobuchar, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ed.
Your thoughts on how tonight went?
I thought it was great. When you're up there with all those candidates, you want to say more, and there'll be more debates. But my major points was to show that in the end, we're going to be running against Donald Trump, whoever this candidate is. So I, a number of times, showed how he hasn't delivered on his promises, whether it's saying we'd be safer with Iran, whether it is on pharmaceutical prices, whether it's on infrastructure. And I think that point needed to be made more. And I tried to make it.
It did seem like he was maybe an elephant in the room that didn't get mentioned much by the rest of the field for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know. But in the end, if you're the candidate, which I want to be, you got to be on that stage with him and show that you're going to deliver and how you're going to beat him. Because in the end, that's the one thing that unites our party. And I would say independents and some moderate Republicans, they want to win.
What was the one issue maybe you didn't get to expand as much on that you would have liked to share more of your thoughts about?
I would have liked to talk a little bit more about elections. It's so timely, and the Russian interference and the fact that Donald Trump's White House literally stopped us in our tracks. I would like to talk a little bit more about guns and my role in trying to close the boyfriend loophole. But in the end, my favorite moment of the debate is when Governor Inslee said that he was the only one on the stage that had been, the implication was leading on women's rights. And I thought to myself, you know what? This is historic. For the first time, we have literally doubled the number of women that have ever participated in a Democratic presidential debate in history. We did that tonight. And here he's saying that. So I said, I think there's 3 women on the stage that have done all right on women's rights.
Where do you go next after tonight?
Well, I'm going back to Washington because we've got some really important votes. Not only I'm on the defense authorization with more discussions about Iran and the president getting us so close to war, but also we are going to be talking about the border funding and make sure that gets done.
Well, Senator Klobuchar, thanks for stopping by.
You.
Safe travels. We'll see you soon.
All right, thanks.
Elaine, I know we're standing by to possibly speak with, where'd he go? Well, we'll have somebody for you shortly, Elaine.
Ed O'Keefe, the intrepid Ed O'Keefe for us. Ed, thank you. Molly, let me ask you, interesting to hear Senator Klobuchar raise that moment. I imagine that there were some women who were watching whose ears perhaps perked up at that as well, Democratic primary voters.
Absolutely. I mean, that was kind of presumptuous of Governor Inslee. I hope I'm not getting out too far ahead of myself by saying that. But yes, and tomorrow night we have a bunch of women up there on the stage. I mean, this is historic, and if you look at what Amy Klobuchar has done in the Senate in terms of sexual assault, preventing sexual assault, and a lot of issues that are related specifically to women. She's really led on those issues, and she's worked with Republicans. And she highlighted this tonight, is giving that answer about the pharmaceutical industry. Strike that, reverse it. On the answer related to what are you going to do for more African American women in this country, and she said, one of the first things I did, I was the lead sponsor on a bill to increase STEM funding for underprivileged youth, and it was passed, and the president signed it. So she's out there trying to make this case that she does work across the aisle, and she is working on issues that affect people at home in underserved communities. And if she can get that, if she can keep making that point with those one-liners, because she really was the queen of the one-liner tonight, the foam and the beer, and it was she added some levity to the debate stage, but she was also very serious and somber in what she had to say.
I think it's interesting to me, Leslie, because it just raises this question, if you take a step back for a moment, of this dynamic that is different, right? Where you have now in the Democratic field a number of female candidates and frankly, a lot of these male candidates have not had to encounter that dynamic. And on a debate stage where it is visible for everyone to see and to kind of pick apart those moments, which could be perceived as being somewhat disrespectful by some. That's something that perhaps I'm sure other candidates will be very mindful of, those things.
Sure. I mean, certainly Republicans have that challenge. Usually there's one female on the stage, and they had to deal with, the way their face looks and these just horrible, if you remember some of those attacks that came from now President Trump. But what's interesting that Klobuchar did is she talked about her record of success in getting it executed, signed by the president. When you typically think about somebody who's going to be a front runner in a party, they traditionally are governors because they're executives on their level, but they pass education reform, insurance reform, tort reform, just a variety of different things, and they can point to that level of success and say, we can magnify that nationally. She's actually showing I can do that, and that alone may be one of the biggest advantages she has.
The difference between Amy Klobuchar, who's a friend, and Joe Biden, who's a friend, is that he enjoys African-American support, the heart and soul of the Democratic Party, including black women. She, unfortunately, does not have the same experience or reputation in the African-American community. So Joe Biden, to this point, can afford to really run a campaign focused on the true other side, and that's Donald Trump and the Republicans, where Amy Klobuchar is trying to run a general election campaign in the primary, in which, in order for her to even have a chance of being successful, she has to find the Southern groove, starting in South Carolina, and connect with African-American voters, particularly African-American women. And while I get it, she has a tremendous track record of success, I would just caution her in pressing the gas in that lane and really reverse course and focus on trying to connect in a way with voters who may not know her as well as voters in another part of the country.
Interesting.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's an interesting tack because the number one issue amongst Democratic primary voters is who can beat Donald Trump.
Beating him.
And the one tack is I'm stronger than him. I can out insult him. I'm piffier than him. Take the fight. That's the Warren tack. Klobuchar is taking another tack, and it's not necessarily confronting Trump, but it is appealing to voters who might have voted for him, which is a slightly different tack. It is, I can get stuff done. It doesn't matter. It's progressive in terms of its values, but it will get done. I've worked with people on the other side of the aisle to do that.
Like those never-Trumper Republicans.
But those voters may not participate in the Democratic primary. And therefore, you have a real challenge. It's one thing to not like Trump in a joint election and be a never-Trumper, but getting them to vote in the Democratic primary.
How many open primaries are there? I want to know how many open primaries there are these days.
But even Democrats whose main issue is, can I beat Trump? And they say, I want someone who can appeal to Republicans, and they're Democratic voters.
Right.
But the characteristic that they're looking for is, who can appeal to independent voters?
All right.
Who's going to win the suburbs?
All right, so we're going to continue this conversation. They're telling me I have to sneak in a break. Coming up after the break, more on the first Democratic debate. Stay with us. You're streaming CBSN. Welcome back to our continuing coverage of the first Democratic primary debate. With me back on set are Leslie Sanchez, Ari Sevugan, Molly Hooper, and Antjuan Seawright. And CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns is in the spin room in Miami. So, Caitlin, just describe the situation as it stands now. A lot of candidates making their way around that room.
A lot of candidates making their way around, which is actually pretty remarkable because usually they just send out their surrogates here to talk to us. But Cory Booker is right to my right. Elizabeth Warren is to the left. Julian Castro was walking around here as well. We just talked to Tulsi Gabbard, as you know, as well as John Delaney. So they are out talking about their performances tonight. This was the first debate of this campaign, of course, drawing a lot of attention. There were some breakout moments for some candidates like Julian Castro, others like Beto O'Rourke. The two of them sparred. There were questions about kind of how he did tonight. But the big challenge for all of these candidates, even those who did really well tonight, is keeping this momentum going, because tomorrow, as we know, we reset the stage, literally a whole whole new slate of candidates. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, and Bernie Sanders are kind of at center stage tomorrow night. So the key for candidates like Julian Castro and others who feel like they did well tonight, keeping that momentum going into tomorrow, where the news cycle is likely to change pretty fast.
So you mentioned Julian Castro. I want to play a little bit of his comments when talking about the issue of immigration. He was describing that heartbreaking picture that we're now all so familiar with of the migrant father and daughter who drowned trying to cross the Rio Grande. This is Julian Castro at the debate earlier. Let's listen.
Watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. It should also piss us all off. If I were president today, and it should spur us to action, if I were president today, I would sign an executive order that would get rid of Trump's zero tolerance policy, the Remain in Mexico policy, and the metering policy. This metering policy is basically what prompted Oscar and Valeria to make that risky swim across the river.
So, Caitlin, I mean, this was an example of what you described to us earlier in the evening, where Castro is one of the few candidates on that stage who actually had outlined some specific policy proposals, not just a sort of blanket opposition to this administration's policies, but had specific policy proposals on this issue.
That's right. He is only one of a few candidates really talking about the issue of immigration. But why this exchange was so important for him is because he's been really suffering in the polls. He hasn't been able to gain some traction. So his campaign was really looking to tonight to have that breakthrough moment. And his campaign really feels like they got it. After that exchange, they were out here in the spin room. And I actually have a guest coming here with me right now. Cory Booker, Senator, good to see you. How are you? Thanks for being here.
It's good to be here.
Take us to that debate stage and that night. How do you think you did?
I feel incredibly well. This was a chance for America. Many folks who don't know my history, don't know my plans, don't know what I've accomplished, to get a chance to learn more about me. And we think we had, my team thinks we had a phenomenal night and made a lot of really strong points on issues that matter to Americans.
Several times this night, you referenced Newark, your hometown, an inner city community. You talked about it through various issues, the economy, through guns. How critical is your hometown to your campaign?
Well, if somebody wants to know who I am, know that I led New Jersey's largest city through the crisis of the Great Recession, and we turned it around, creating tens of thousands of jobs. Our first period of growth in 60 years. Took a school system that was under state takeover to now the #1 public school system in America for beat the odds schools, high poverty, high performance. That chief executive experience, and the reason I got into politics in the first place, those folks who put their faith in me first, is a driving force of a lot of the things I do. My purpose remains the same, to fight for folks who are left out, left aside, looked down upon, to make sure that every zip code in America, inner cities to rural farm communities, has somebody in the White House that will fight for them.
Is there anything that you wanted to address tonight that you didn't get the chance to?
Yeah, there's a lot of issues tonight that did not come up. I was very frustrated that I didn't get to talk more about my vision for dealing with the crisis of climate change. Greenpeace has said that me and Governor Inslee are the two best climate candidates in this race. I didn't have a chance to talk about my plan. And more than that, I did not get a chance to talk enough about the economy, which a lot of Americans are finding everything from healthcare too expensive to not having jobs that pay enough dignity and offer them retirement security. So there's a lot more issues that need to come up. I'll be out there talking about them on the campaign trail, and I'm very excited that we have 5 more debates this year alone and more, but I want to make sure I continue to be on the debate stage. So I'm hoping people will go to CoryBooker.com and contribute $1 to my campaign or whatever they can.
Do you feel like you had a breakout moment tonight, and what was that?
I think being there on the stage, showing people there at center stage that I could stand and make the case, show what kind of leadership I have. I think in totality, we had a number of moments where I showed who I was, and I think it energized a lot of folks.
And where do you go from here?
Back to the campaign trail. Tomorrow, we have to go back to Washington. We're dealing with some real big debates, especially around making sure we push the president's hand to deal with this crisis that he's responsible for at the border. And I'll make sure that this weekend I'm back out there on the campaign trail pushing really, really hard. And I'm glad that we're towards the end of the quarter. A lot of fundraising going on to make sure we show strength, and that's why you'll see me a lot on social media asking people to make contributions if they believe that my voice should remain on that debate stage.
Senator Booker, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Thank you. Good to see you.
Caitlin, turn that way.
All right. Hi, Elaine. Bear with us for a moment. We have another candidate coming to our stage. Hi, Mayor de Blasio. Good to see you. Thank you for being with us. We're good to go. How do you think you did tonight?
I feel great. The debate's a chance to say who you really are and to show what you stand for. And look, I'm clear. I'm a progressive. I'm on the side of working people. And I'm not willing to mince words. And some of my colleagues bluntly were mincing words, and I had to call them out for it because we got to sort out who we are as Democrats. And part of what we got to do that we didn't do well in 2016 is be very bold and very honest with the American people about the changes we're going to make. And tonight, I felt I was able to get that across.
Early on in the debate, you actually went after Congressman Beto O'Rourke on the issue of Medicare for All and the issue of being able to keep your private insurer. Why take that moment and why go after him specifically?
Because I felt he was trying to play all sides. And he wasn't being clear about the fact that the private insurance system is failing so many people. I'm talking about middle-class people. I'm talking about working-class people in this country who, even if they have insurance, they can barely use it because there's so many ways they have to pay the deductibles and the premiums and the copays, and they can't use it. And to say, hey, let's celebrate the private insurance industry when it's failing tens of millions of Americans, that's just wrong. And that's not what the Democratic Party should be about.
What did tonight mean for your campaign? You've been polling kind of further down in the polls. Was this a make or break moment for you in your view?
Look, it was an important opportunity to introduce myself to the people of the United States, and I feel very proud that I was able to just show them who I am, show them my heart, show them what I believe, show them some of the things we've done in New York, which I think matter to people. I think people want a leader who's actually done something. I think we've tried someone who was an amateur and is in the White House right now, and the results have been pretty devastating. I think this time folks want a proven executive, but they want real change. And I can offer that, and I can show it. And I felt I was able to get that across tonight.
Can you tell us a little bit, take us inside that room, because we're in the spin room, but you guys were actually across the street in a different room. Tell us what it felt like in that room with all of those people on stage, 10 of you all together in the same place at the same time. Was there tension? Could you feel it? Was there camaraderie? What was it like?
Well, there was both, and I think it was honest. I think there's look, we're all Democrats. And I think everyone would support each other in the end. We do believe in unity. I believe in unity. But there is tension. There's disagreements on issues, and that's fine. There's disagreements about how we need to come to a different vision as a party. In 2016, we did not have a clear vision. In 2016, a lot of working people who strayed from the Democratic Party, they just didn't know what the Democratic Party stood for. They thought, in too many cases, we were the party of elites. That's unacceptable. So I think those tensions were on the stage again tonight. Folks who take more of a status quo position and folks like me who want to see more profound change. That's a healthy debate. It's an urgent debate. It's not always going to be something where everyone speaks in a nice, calm voice, but it was substantive. No one was making fun of anyone's, how tall they were or calling them sleepy or anything like that. It was substantive, but it was urgent.
Well, I think you were the tallest one on that stage.
I am the tallest one. Proud of that fact.
I appreciate your time, Mayor. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. Thank you. Elaine, back to you.
All right, Caitlin, excellent job, as always, juggling the many candidates coming through that spin room. Thanks so much. So let me turn to my panel to just get some reaction initially to what we just heard there from these two candidates. And Hari, I'm going to start with you. We heard from Senator Booker. Say that he wanted to talk a little bit more about the economy. And as we know, when you look at the polling, that's right behind healthcare in terms of what is important, jobs and the economy.
Yeah, and I agree with him. I wish there were more focus on that. And even in the issues that were brought up, I think there are economic angles or prisms to look at it through, which resonate with voters. On healthcare, we talk a lot about access on the Democratic side. We have to talk about cost. Cost is what is moving voters. It is not access. It's an important issue for sure, and we've got to be clear about what we want, but we have to focus on cost.
We can do both. We can talk about affordability and access.
Absolutely.
But to your point, quality of life issues, as I said to you earlier, are the dominant force. And Corey was smart to talk about his wanting to talk about the economy because 2 weeks ago he participated in the Black Economic Alliance Forum
in South Carolina.
Guess what the #1 issue was for Black voters? The economy. And the sub-issue was the economy is working for some, but it's not working for them as African-American voters. And so while this argument is being made by Trump and the Republicans that the economy is booming, but it's screaming for people who come from places where Corey is from and for people who ultimately decide who our nominee will be. So he was smart for saying, look, I want to talk about this even more. And I think this is a niche that he can take away from tonight's debate to say this is something we should be talking about even more.
What about from Mayor de Blasio, Hari? I mean, what is your... I see a look in your eye. But the thing is, so he talked about in 2016 how there was not enough of a vision, he felt, on the Democratic side. And now he's trying to kind of help shape that.
He put a flag into the ground tonight. He staked out some claim on the left. He's clearly running as a progressive that's for working people. He repeated the message over and over. He took opportunities to set up Beto and others to make that point. Is very aggressive. I think he did a good job of establishing himself. I don't know if that lane is wide enough for him to run in, and not just because he's tall, but because I just don't. I think it's too crowded.
It's too crowded already.
And we'll see how crowded it is tomorrow night when you have a whole different crop of candidates. And you know, again, tonight was interesting. You know, we got to hear these candidates in their own words. But tomorrow, as Caitlin's been saying, it's a whole new set.
Right, it resets.
It's a whole a reset. And you know, I think it'll be interesting to see if the same questions are asked of those candidates and how some of these interactions between candidates on the trail, like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden on the issues of race and women's issues, how those issues come up and what take Kamala Harris, you know, approaches it with.
You wanted to wait, I mean, because Leslie, one thing I thought about, again, in addition to, you know, Hari pointing out that moment from the Republican perspective, that moment when the moderator asked, you know, who here wants to do away with private insurance, talking about healthcare, and you had Elizabeth Warren and you had Bill de Blasio raising their hand. What else? I mean, you know, tomorrow there is the potential, right, for some really sharp elbows to come out, I think. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, you're going to have Joe Biden on stage, Antjuan, so, you know, the potential is there, right? So how closely, compared to what we saw this night, you think, you know, Republicans especially are going to be watching to see, you know, just how fractious that debate could be?
Well, I think they're going to look at the distinct difference. I hope the same question is asked, and we can also find out how many believe it's important to take away private health insurance. I think that's a good, fair point, so that you can see. I think
compare across the board.
Compare across the board, but I also think they're going to put their finger in the wind and realize it's a very difficult question to answer for the political game.
And also, let's see how many times Donald Trump's name is mentioned. Right. Joe Biden is the great unifier, and if that's what he's going to sell tomorrow night, then he's going to be bringing up why Donald Trump, specifically, Donald Trump should not be the president.
Yeah.
Two things. Number one, on the issue of private insurance, we saw Kamala Harris walk back her response to the issue. And that's because it's one thing to do it in a vacuum. It's another thing when you get on the campaign
trail. Remind people who
trail.
aren't familiar what exactly that was.
In a town hall format, she was asked, does she specifically support Medicare for all? She gave an answer. She defended her answer, but she quickly walked her back after days of being on the campaign trail. And that's the beauty about the primary. The marketplace of ideas allow discussions to be had. And as you visit places, you find out perhaps your position coming in is not your position going out. But tomorrow night, I think candidates will make a mistake by attacking Joe Biden on that stage. Why? Because to this point, notice I said to this point, he has been able to take a bruising and keep on cruising. And the more they attack him, it seems as if the stronger he gets. We saw that this past weekend in South Carolina. We've seen it also to this point. And I am a firm believer that he will focus his energy totally on Donald Trump, because the more he does that, the more strong he is in a primary, and the more Trump responds back to him, which raises his profile and raises the argument he's the person to take on Trump.
All right, maybe it won't be so, quote, boring.
All right, on that note, we have to sneak in another break. More coverage straight ahead. Stay with us. You're streaming CBSN. Welcome back to our continuing coverage on Red and Blue of the Democratic primary debate. Let's take you straight to Miami and the spin room, where our CBS News political correspondent, Ed O'Keefe, is standing by with Julian Castro. Ed.
Hi, Elaine. Secretary Castro. You look at the early returns, and there seems to be near universal agreement. You had a pretty good night.
I did. I think I had a great night. I think we had the highest jump in mentions and Google searches. People that may not have been following my campaign saw tonight that I have the right experience to be president, one of the few people with executive experience. I have a strong vision for the future of our country. I can handle myself, as people saw tonight, and I can beat Donald Trump.
A little bit of like I told you so.
Well,
on
look,
your face.
You know that so far the media have been mostly covering just a few campaigns, and it's nothing new that I haven't gotten as much attention as I've always believed, and my team has believed that my campaign should get. And we knew that we had to come and earn it. And so tonight, what the American people saw is that I came and I knew what I was talking about. I'd done my homework. I always do, and I think I earned people's attention and their support tonight.
You said your Google mentions skyrocketed. I suspect there was a lot of Google searching going on about Section 1325. In plain English, explain to people what it is and what you would like to see done to it.
Section 1325 of the Immigration and Nationality Act is the law that criminalizes when somebody comes across the border. We need to repeal that and go back to the way that we used to treat these things as a civil violation instead of a criminal one. That section is what the law that allows this Trump administration to separate parents, to incarcerate them and separate them from their little children.
So you want to legalize border crossings?
No, it's not legalize it. It's still a civil violation. They still have to go through a court process. They're still subject to deportation. But I don't want to criminalize desperation. I want to criminalize crime. And as long as Section 1325 is still the law, then we're going to be able to separate, this government will separate children from their parents. My plan, and I'm glad to see that Senator Warren, Senator Booker, and Congressman Ryan support my plan would end family separation. Congressman O'Rourke's plan does not do that, and that's what I pointed out tonight. I respect Congressman O'Rourke. I supported him, campaigned for him when he ran against Senator Cruz, but he hasn't done his homework. And he was saying that we shouldn't repeal that section because we need to punish drug traffickers and human traffickers. I agree with him. What I also pointed out was that we have other distinct laws that already punish drug traffickers and human traffickers. The only people that this law punishes are innocent people that are coming here because they're desperate. I don't believe that we should do that.
That was the Texas tussle that a lot of your Lone Star Democrats were worried would eventually come, and it came tonight.
I believe in protecting these families that are human beings. I don't care where they come from or the color of their skin. They're human beings. I believe in treating them with compassion and common sense and humanity, not with cruelty. And we need to end that section of the law to do it. And so whether it's Congressman O'Rourke or anybody else, I'm going to fight for them. And that's what I was doing tonight.
Can you clarify what you were talking about regarding abortion? There was another question there. You mentioned reproductive rights, reproductive freedom, but also the possibility that transgender people would need it. There was some confusion in your answer, I think.
Trans men who have reproductive capability also have a concern about their reproductive rights, and oftentimes they have the most difficult time getting access to reproductive health care, including abortion. And so I wanted to mention that as part of the conversation, because any legislation that we pass, anything we do, should be inclusive. Look, if I'm president, I'll be a president that knows that everyone counts, whether that's somebody in the LGBTQ community or the first visit that I made was not to Iowa or New Hampshire after my announcement. It was to San Juan, Puerto Rico, to tell our fellow Americans that they count too, and I won't forget about them.
But is this an issue you hear a lot about on the trail?
Well, I think it's a growing concern out there. The numbers of people impacted by this may be small, but at the same time, you hardly ever hear their concerns mentioned or talked about on a debate stage like this. And so I believe it's important for that representation to occur, for their issues to be spoken about as well.
Did you get a sense when you were up there on stage that you had done what you needed to do? When was the moment when you realized that?
Oh, absolutely. I knew that early in the debate, and I knew that at the end, with the closing statement. You only have 45 seconds, so that's not much time. I'm getting more time now. But
you're welcome.
Thanks a lot. But yeah, I could tell with the crowd applause, my team seemed very happy. Obviously, the Google mentions and the Twitter mentions went through the roof. So I feel great about it, and we're going to build on this momentum.
Now, well, that's my next question, because sometimes that happens. Candidate suddenly catches fire, but they can't sustain it. Are you able to sustain it should it come in the next few days?
Well, I believe we can. We're going to work hard to build our campaign. I also don't believe in being a flash-in-the-pan candidate. I'm perfectly content getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and we still have 7 months until Iowa caucuses. I don't want to be a flash in the pan or the leading candidate right now. I want to be the leading candidate on February 3rd, 2020. And the way that folks can help is to go to JulianCastro.com and to make a contribution, $5, $10, whatever you can afford.
All right.
That'll help me sustain the momentum, Ed.
You've been saying that this was coming, so it seems to have happened tonight.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care, Secretary. Safe travels. Elaine, clearly somebody coming into this that had to have a moment, and he certainly did. And you can tell kind of in the pep and the step of the Castro team tonight that they may have done here tonight what they needed to do to keep him in the conversation in the coming weeks.
Right. Excellent to hear that interview. And you can see the pep in the step from the candidate himself there. Ed O'Keefe for us. Thank you so much, Ed. Let me turn to the panel here to get some reaction. Antjuan, let me start with you to what we just saw and heard there from Julian Castro reflecting on his performance tonight.
Well, if you remember, I said to you earlier, there are 4 things a debate can do to you. They can make you, break you, and I laid them out. And I think tonight he got a second burst of energy. I think he caught his second win. Now, how long does this last? We don't know. But I think he definitely has some momentum coming out of tonight's debate, particularly when you think about when the story is written about tonight compared to tomorrow and the type of candidates who are on both nights. He won tonight. This will give him some momentum to get out on the trail, take his message. He will have some support. He'll generate some online support, and I am assured that he will generate some financial support that could position him for the second debate.
Because, Hari, if this is about sort of introducing oneself, right, and making the case that you can be the executive or you can be the person to take on President Trump, first of all, how do you think he did based on that?
I think he bought himself another look. People swiped right. Right? I mean,
did you just make a Tinder reference? Okay.
It's late night, right?
Wouldn't they have swiped left?
Okay.
It depends on the
Clearly
app,
we don't know. Right.
But he's bought himself a second look. I think people want to give him a chance. They certainly, I think, will want to see him at another debate. Yeah. And that's important. And to Antjuan's point, we don't know how long that lasts. We don't know if the opportunities that presented themselves tonight will present themselves again. Because that's a lot of it. The questions that he got asked were ones that he was ready to swing at.
And make this point, the more we have the immigration discussion, the more he can carve his niche on the political highway and drive his car straight down that road. Because clearly tonight, he had the clear-cut answer on what some could be the possible solution to answering the immigration crisis from a Democratic perspective, particularly being from Texas. And while Texas is big, it's not big enough for 2 boys from Texas to compete in the primary.
So that's the thing. I mean, it was interesting, Leslie, to hear him talking with Ed O'Keefe there, and he asked him about the, quote-unquote Texas tussle. He didn't mention Beto O'Rourke there, but he did say, I don't want to be a flash in the pan. I mean, clearly that's a reference to Beto O'Rourke.
Well, sure, who's completely faded, and we talked about that before. But what's interesting about Julian and his family more particularly, this is a family of consistent incremental wins. So they've not gone for big, wide, sweeping success. The way they've managed their personal family success is to have the successes together, and they have such a tight family unit. So it does put them on a more national platform. I don't know where and how that's going to come out, but I think there's some positives that come back. He adds a lot of value to the debate. He elevates the conversation on immigration. He forces these candidates in some ways to address these issues in a deeper way than they wouldn't. Whereas most of the time we talk about pulling the party to the left and it's pulling maybe a centrist to the left. He's doing actually the opposite. He's pulling the party to more sensible, common sense reform, especially on a critical issue like immigration. It's great in a state like Florida. I mean, they're not necessarily talking, they talk maybe a little bit more about asylum there, but it was a Telemundo sponsored debate. It's just the right circumstance and platform for this candidate, and I'm really hopeful he continues to remain competitive because he's really making it a better race.
Is there a lane, Molly? I mean, this lane he's carving for himself.
Well,
now.
we have to see. It sort of sounded when he was talking to Ed. It sort of sounded like he was in periodization training. You know, like for tennis players, where it's like this month you're working on this, but you're incrementally getting better so that you're ready to finish strong.
Building
at the US
on what
Open.
you've had.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
You're working all year for that, and it is incremental because with so many candidates, how do you really separate yourself? And it was funny, $5, $10, go to my website, and that could make a big difference for these candidates because it takes a lot of money to stay competitive because you have to travel. I mean, you have to get out to your donors. I mean, it's not easy. Advertising and events and all that jazz.
Bernie Sanders was the same way, though. If you think
Just
about when he
$25.
first started, $25, a small incremental amounts, and it was a lot of like millennials or just like young people, like disaffected voters, people that never voted before, registered to be part on the feel the burn, and way before he caught fire. So anything in that sense is possible.
And guess what else, Leslie? The fact is they're all competing for the second debate, and you have to have a financial buy-in or component in order to make the second debate. And if you look at Corey, Senator Booker, and the former mayor, the fact is they were on that last tier of trying to make this first debate. So I think they're trying to use tonight to plant their seeds now so they can have some room to grow. Because guess what? Tomorrow, most people are going to forget about tonight.
Yeah.
And the focus is going to be on what people consider the main stage or the big stage with Biden, Harris, and Sanders, some of the more top tier candidates. And so they're trying to get it in now so they can run up the clock tonight, store some money in the bank, and make their way towards position themselves for the second debate.
So I want to turn the conversation to Senator Elizabeth Warren. First, just to sort of set that up, let's play a bite of Senator Warren talking about the issue of a gun policy. Let's listen to that.
Gun violence is a national health emergency in this country, and we need to treat it like that. So what can we do? We can do the things that are sensible. We can do the universal background checks. We can ban the weapons of war. But we can also double down on the research and find out what really works, where it is that we can make the differences at the margins that will keep our children safe. We need to treat this like the virus that's killing our children.
So, Antjuan, I want to start with you, just because, we were both in South Carolina. I know she was one of those candidates, 4 of them, I believe, who participated in that Black Economic Alliance presidential forum where she talked about the economy. She seemed to, by the accounts of reporters who were in the room, make a connection with that audience. And you've talked about how she has connected with Black female voters in particular. How do you think she did tonight?
Well, I was disappointed. I came in with high expectations that she was going to be as aggressive as she's been in introducing policy and rolling out policy into this debate tonight and confirming her policy positions, but more so really elevating the conversation and participating and behaving like the front runner. But it seems as if she got caught up in just being another person on the stage. And the fact is there were several moments in the debate where she could have owned the conversation because she's owned it outside of this debate stage, and that's why you've seen her poll numbers climb to the point to where they are. As it relates to the gun issue, I think this, again, was another opportunity for her to own the stage because, I've spoken to her folks about this. The Charleston situation hit me personally. I lost a friend, the pastor of that church. She's been to South Carolina. She was in Charleston 2 weeks ago. She could have used that experience, made it very personable and transferable to tonight and really own the stage on the gun issue.
That was, certainly is something that a lot of people were watching. But Hari, what's your sense of how it was that she performed overall?
I agree with Antjuan. I think she missed a lot of opportunities to interject, to get in, to break into conversations that other candidates took. She didn't need to do that. Everyone else did. That's a key difference.
Given where she stands in the polling.
Given where she stands in the polling, great. I think it is also interesting that she wasn't the wonk on the stage tonight. That is her reputation. Clearly, she's established it, or she feels comfortable enough with the understanding that she's established it in the public, that she doesn't need to do that on stage. She spoke very powerfully to her values. I think that is incredibly important in these debates. A list of policies is forgotten. speaking forcefully to your values is remembered. And we know that she's a fighter. And that's what she wanted to get across. If somebody does a word cloud tomorrow around Elizabeth Warren, the word fight is going to be the biggest word.
But one thing we have to remember, there's a debate tomorrow. And the fact is she's running second now. Her and Bernie are right on each other's heels. However, if Kamala Harris has a big night tomorrow night, Kamala Harris will easily replace her, considering African-American women will play a large role in this primary election and who our nominee will be. And make no mistake, black women will most of the time go home to one of their own. Not saying they're monolithic, but if given the choice, they will go home to their own.
All right, and on that note, so we'll be all back here tomorrow. Yes, before we wrap up, I need to get some final thoughts and just want to go around the table. Okay, Leslie, let's start with you.
Ladies first.
Thank you. As the Republican, I have so many things to know. Insightful. I think tomorrow is definitely different caliber of debate because you have many more senior candidates with higher polling. So I think they're going to aim their direction at Donald Trump, and that's going to change the dynamic.
Ari?
I think Warren didn't win tonight. She didn't need to. She did what she needed to. I think Castro earned a second look from everybody.
All right, Molly?
Castro is great. I loved Amy Klobuchar's one-liners, and I hope there's more of them tomorrow night. And by the way, it cannot go without saying Cory Booker's expressions and reactions look tonight.
The internet loves them, yeah.
They were just, I mean, classic. And if he was somebody's vice president, our State of the Union addresses would be thoroughly entertaining because it's that shot of the speaker and the vice president. Would be classic.
Priceless. Antjuan.
The clear winner tonight is all of us around this table. But no, on a serious note, it's still early. And the people who watch these debates, who are watching tonight, are the people inside the bubble or the coastal elites. And make no mistake, what happens after tomorrow night will be telling of how this race tends to shape up going forward.
All right, Antjuan, Leslie, Molly, and Hari, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And you've been watching CBSN's coverage of the Democratic debates. The event continues tomorrow in Miami with 10, actually later today, 10 more candidates taking the stage. Be sure to stick with us. Our coverage will begin once again at 8 p.m. Eastern with updates throughout the night with post-debate analysis at 11. We'll be right back. The day's news continues after the break. But first, a quick look at some highlights from the night.
When you've got a government, when you've got an economy that does great for those with money and isn't doing great for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple.
Watching that image of Oscar and his daughter Valeria is heartbreaking. It should also piss us all off.
Obviously, if there was an attack against the our troops, then there would have to be a response.
If you need a license to drive a car, you should need a license to buy and own a firearm.
Immigrants, they do not diminish America. They are America.
My goal is to ensure that every American is well enough to live to their full potential because they have health care.
The biggest threat to the security of the United States is Donald Trump.